This is the Tree of Life, Season 15, Chapter 5. In this episode, we will be talking about oscillations as creating a current within a primary, secondary, and tertiary structure. To start out, in past episodes, we talked about structural adjustments as operations describing conformational changes within structures. We also talked about how these conformational shifts might also occur when there are distinct structures within a larger structure, i.e., there are primary, secondary, tertiary structures. In a much earlier episode, we talked about how there are oscillations within structures. In this episode, I would like to connect those ideas by discussing a hypothetical primary, secondary, and tertiary structural arrangement and its conformational shifts. To begin, if you imagine that there is a primary structure comprised of four individuals, persons A, situated above persons B, C, and D. And you imagine there is a secondary structure comprising persons A, E, F, and G. And a tertiary structure comprising individuals A, H, I, and J. Where within the secondary structure and tertiary structure, impulse 1 is affirmed and impulse 2 negated for all individuals by person A. And within the primary structure, impulse 1 is affirmed for person B, impulse 2 negated in phase 1, whilst in phase 2 the reverse. And for persons C and D, in phase 1 impulse 2 is affirmed and impulse 1 negated. Whilst for phase 2, impulse 1 is affirmed and impulse 2 negated. Thus, we see that the three structures have a pole in phase 1 at the top in person B, and in phase 2 at the bottom in persons C and D. Thus, what we see is that the conformational shift represented by phase 1 into phase 2 for the three structures produces a flipping of the poles as between B and C, D. Now, in past episodes, we described this form of conformational change as a structural adjustment. Specifically, a simple structural bypass. That is, within the primary structure, person B flips phase, as does persons C and D. But what we didn't point out is that if person A affirms impulse 1 and negates impulse 2 for person B, whilst for persons C and D, person A affirms impulse 2 and negate impulse 1, then the flipping of phase represents the flipping of the poles of that structure. It is this flipping of the poles of the structure with the phase shift, or structural bypass, which creates a movement in a single direction in a way that can be understood to be analogous to a current, or oscillation. Since we see that dialectical impulses arranged in such a fashion as one is affirmed and the other negated, create exclusive word associations, we can see that this movement along with the poles attributes a movement of those word associations unidirectionally, in alternate directions, with respect to dialectical associations. Likewise, we see that this simple primary, secondary and tertiary structure, comprising a total of 10 individuals or 9 individuals with A, affirming impulse 1, or impulse 2 for all 9 is consistent with a static distribution for persons E, F, G, H, I, J and a flipping of phase with respect to B, C, D. Thus, we can see that the input and output of an intersection cancels out. That means that the secondary and tertiary structures don't flip phase during the phase shift corresponding to the primary structure. It is this which produces the simple structural bypass as a consequence of two distinct nonlinear structural bypasses occurring simultaneously. Likewise, we can see also that it is this shift in polarity which produces a resonant cavity represented by a particular bodily rhythm or cycle. That's the end of the podcast for today.